Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Heather Ward. I'm an associate attorney here at the Legacy Legal Team. My primary practice area is in estate planning, so we're going to talk about that a little bit today. Particularly a type of deed that I've talked about before quite often because we're utilizing it a lot in most of our estate plans here at the office, and that's called an enhanced life estate deed, sometimes called a Ladybird Deed after Ladybird Johnson out in Texas, where was one of the first places that type of deed was used. It's basically a type of deed that works like a transfer on death deed in most cases. Florida is one of, I believe, 5 states in the entire country that has this type of deed. And it's great when it works how it's supposed to. Like I said, it works like a transfer on death deed. So while you are alive, it is your house to do whatever you want with. You can sell it, you can refinance, you can do whatever you need to without anybody else's input besides any co-owners. So say you own the property with your spouse, then of course they have to agree. If you own it jointly with somebody, upon your death, it automatically goes to that joint owner. But then what it does is it addresses what happens beyond that, without that person being considered a co-owner, which causes a whole other list of issues. If you want to sell, you have to have them sign off. Refinancing, same thing. And it can cause some issues with capital gains taxes and things like that, homestead exemptions. So we don't typically recommend just naming somebody as a co-owner on a property just to make sure that they get it whenever you pass away. So this was an alternative where we were saying, okay, it's my property, nobody else has any input, but as soon as I pass, they'll record my death certificate, and then that property is automatically theirs. It avoids those capital gains implications where we can still get a step up in basis or an basis adjustment, but generally a step up in basis. So where we have a little bit of a less tax hit. But I've started to realize that there are some implications that people don't really consider when they're thinking about this type of deed. So I wanted to talk about those. The reason why most people go this route is because they think it's easier than a trust, which does all the same things. It says who it goes to, it avoids probate, it does all these great things. But the trust is usually more expensive, so of course I am understanding of wanting to save a little bit of money, but I think there's some people that are just not thinking about the implications of it, so I wanted to talk through some of those. First of those is for the families that say they're wanting to name their children as the beneficiary under that deed. Sometimes your kids are going to be too young or too inexperienced to know what to do with that property or the proceeds from that property if they decide to sell it. So say you have a 23-year-old child that you want to leave the house to. Okay, great. You die tomorrow, God forbid. They'll be able to decide what to do with that house. They can continue to live there and pay for it. They can sell it and get those proceeds. If we have it in a trust, we can say, okay, yes, they can have that decision, but then this is how the proceeds are going to be handled. So that's one consideration, is just whether that person's going to be responsible enough to handle those. Usually the proceeds is the concern of it. Another concern that pops up is when there's more than one child or more than one beneficiary. It doesn't have to be a child. When there's more than one beneficiary involved. Probably about 95% of my clients, when we're talking about a Ladybird or just estate planning in general, they're going to tell me, oh, Heather, my kids get along so well. There's no way they're going to fight over anything. They're all going to agree either to let their sibling live there or they're going to agree just to sell it and split the money. Okay, that's great. What I tell people is grief makes people do some crazy things. We have several cases where somebody has come back and said, hey, we need to file a petition because my sister is not agreeing on whether to sell the property. They're not agreeing to who the listing agent is going to be. They're not agreeing to the purchase price or the sales price of the property. There's all of these things that go into an agreement, and if everybody that's on that deed can't agree to that, we often have to get court involvement, which is usually through the process of partition, which is usually at least $4,000 to $5,000 minimum. Okay, so yeah, you're saving a little bit of money right now, but you might be causing a huge headache for your kids in the future. So that's one big consideration that nobody really thinks about, and I wasn't super pushy about it because you know your family. If you really truly think that, I can't tell you otherwise. I can tell you what the risks are, but if you decide to go otherwise, then that's on you. But we had a very interesting discovery this week. So obviously I work very closely with Meredith, who does a lot of real estate law, and she has now been made aware that most title insurance companies are a little hesitant when it comes to Ladybird deeds now, particularly why we are advising, not necessarily against them, but why we're advising on this topic a little bit more than we used to, is there was a decision made where, for example, the one that we know about is that the example is a remainder beneficiary has some sort of federal lien that was put onto the parent's property, because under federal law, this type of deed doesn't exist. It's a creature of Florida statute. So even though the son has no vested interest, meaning he doesn't have any current say to the property, somehow the federal government is saying that they can attach to the parent's property, which is not a huge issue until you go to sell, and title insurance is not, which is a huge deal. People are not going to buy a property if they cannot obtain title insurance. This was a huge deal to the point where we're like even hesitant to recommend this type of deed to people unless they have one very responsible child, and that's the only person we've got to take at least a little bit of risk on. But one way to avoid all of this concern is through a trust. And a trust, we can say, my house is going to remain mine and my spouse's for as long as we are alive. We still maintain our homestead exemption. It's still essentially yours, and you can buy, sell, do whatever you want. But then it says what happens when you pass. Another really great thing that a trust does that Ladybird did not do is I can name alternate beneficiaries. For example, you have 2 children and one of them dies before you or even when the property is passed. We can say who that alternate beneficiary is. We usually go down the line, so then the grandkids on that side of the deceased child then can inherit that interest. And again, that's where things start to get really messy, is when grandkids and then children are involved, because they all have different interests at different times. Of course, the grandkids aren't going to want to live there, but maybe the children do, because they might have more of a sentimental attachment to the property than the grandkids do. All of this to say, ladybirds are great and do have their place. We still are recommending them and discussing them at estate planning consults for certain clients, but they aren't as great as everybody puts them out to be. And that's myself included. I sell them a lot, but it's really, I think, becoming more and more important to really counsel through what that means beyond just we're staying out of probate. Yeah, it's great. It stays out of probate. It still does all of that and gets it to who it's supposed to go to. But there's all these other implications that may be coming up. And it's something to be aware of, because, yeah, you're saving a little bit of money now, but you could be creating quite a headache either for yourself or for the multiple beneficiaries that have been named in the future. So that's just my little PSA for today. I'll stay on for just a couple minutes to see if anybody has any questions. But if you want to talk to me about Ladybird deeds, trusts, any sort of estate planning, feel free to give us a call and I'd be happy to talk to you. I do currently do some free consultations to discuss those. So we go through all the options and discuss what's best for you and your family, specifically based on, your family dynamics, the assets that you have, and what you think will be best for you. And we come up with a specific plan and customize that plan to you. Whether that is to continue going with the Ladybird, we do a trust, or something else. Something that we're starting to lean into a little bit more and look more into is a land trust, which is in between, where you don't need a full revocable living trust, just need something just to address this property. But even that, we're still thinking about what the implications of that would be. So we're happy to talk you through any of those things. I'm not seeing any comments popping up today. I know this was a quick one today, but I know most of us are preparing for the holidays and just taking a quick break to do this one. So thank you again if you joined me live. If not, I hope you're watching this on the recording, and feel free to give us a call and get on my calendar to talk about it. Thank you and have a great day.